One evening, just before they walked into the dining hall, Wamba stopped Danso. His eyes became tender as he noticed Danso's untied shoelaces. Without a word, Wamba knelt and gently tied them, taking care with each loop, his touch light but filled with affection. When he stood up, Wamba smiled and tidied Danso's eyebrows as well, then smoothed his suit and adjusted his collar. "You look perfect," Wamba said softly, his voice full of fondness. Warmth spread through Danso's heart at the gesture. It reminded him so much of his mother, the way she used to fuss over him with quiet, unconditional love. A lump formed in his throat, and his eyes misted as memories of her warmth flooded his mind. He blinked quickly, trying to push back the tears. Wamba noticed immediately. He stepped closer and gently placed a hand on Danso's arm, his eyes filled with understanding. "Hey, you okay?" he whispered. Danso nodded, his voice barely above a whisper. It's nothing," he said, though the ache of missing his mother lingered in his heart. Without another word, Wamba pulled him into a gentle embrace, holding him close for a moment. "I'm here, always," Wamba whispered into his ear. Danso relaxed into the hug, the warmth of Wamba's presence soothing the ache in his chest. When they finally pulled away, Danso gave a small smile, feeling comforted in a way he hadn't expected. They exchanged a look of understanding before walking into the dining hall together. As they joined the family for dinner, the first thing Wamba noticed was the tension between his parents, thick and unspoken. Over the last few days, since their talk, King Adebayo and Kwame had tried to act normal, but it was clear to Wamba that things hadn't returned to how they once were. He glanced between his parents as they ate, watching the way they avoided each other's eyes, the way their words felt forced. The laughter, the little touches that had once embarrassed Wamba with their intensity, were gone. Instead, there was a rift between them, one that no amount of pretending could hide. Wamba tried to focus on the light-hearted conversations with Danso and Arewa, but his mind kept drifting back to his parents. He had hoped their heartfelt conversation days earlier had resolved things, but it was becoming clear that the problem ran deeper than he had realized. The clinking of silverware and the quiet murmurs of conversation filled the room, but Wamba's heart was heavy. Beside him, Danso noticed his tension and gently brushed his fingers against Wamba's under the table. It was a small, silent gesture, but it brought Wamba a bit of comfort. Wamba smiled at him gratefully, but his gaze soon returned to his parents. Finally, the weight of his worries became too much to bear. "Are you guys getting a divorce?" Wamba blurted out, his voice breaking the uneasy silence. The question hung in the air like a storm cloud, freezing everyone at the table. King Adebayo and Kwame exchanged shocked glances, their faces paling at the unexpected outburst. Kwame was the first to recover, his voice gentle but firm. "Wamba, where did you get that idea?" he asked, his tone filled with surprise and concern. "I told you, we're working through some things." Wamba fidgeted in his seat, his eyes darting between his parents. "I'm scared," he admitted, his voice small. "You're the most in-love people I know. If you can't make it work, then what hope is there for the rest of us? Please, don't break up." Kwame's gaze mellowed with pain, and King Adebayo looked troubled as well, guilt shadowing his features. "We're not getting a divorce," King Adebayo said, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "We are figuring things out, yes, but that doesn't mean we're splitting up." Wamba swallowed hard, his heart still heavy but slightly eased by their words. "Please, just go back to the way you were," he whispered. Across the table, Arewa, who had been quietly eating, looked up with wide, innocent eyes. "What's a divorce?" she asked, her voice disrupting the heavy quiet. Wamba, thinking quickly, gave her a soft smile. "It's someone's name," he said gently, not wanting her to worry. Arewa's face lit up. "Oh, I like the name. I think my new name should be Divorce. It sounds better than Arewa." Laughter rippled around the table, the tension easing slightly, as even Kwame and King Adebayo exchanged small smiles at her innocence. After dinner, Danso wandered alone through the palace gardens, his mind swirling with thoughts. The scent of jasmine and night-blooming flowers filled the air, but his heart remained restless. He had left Wamba and Arawa to spend time together, as promised in his deal with Arawa. Danso smiled to himself, thinking of Arawa's fierce determination to share her brother. She was protective, much like Wamba, and in a way Danso admired that about her. But tonight, it wasn't just about waiting for Wamba. There was something deeper weighing on him, his unresolved tension with Kwame. Danso had been patient, sensing that Kwame wasn't ready to talk, but he could no longer wait. He needed to clear the air, to ask for Kwame's guidance, especially with the looming storm, when King Kofi would inevitably find out about his relationship with Wamba. As if by fate, Danso turned a corner and saw Kwame seated on a stone bench under a sprawling tree, his back to him. The moonlight cast a soft glow on Kwame, making him appear both strong and weary. Taking a deep breath, Danso walked toward him, his footsteps soft on the grass. "Kwame?" he called out gently. Kwame looked up, surprised. For a moment, silence lingered between them. Then Kwame gestured for Danso to sit beside him, his expression guarded but not cold. "What do you want, Danso?" Kwame asked, his voice steady but cautious. Danso sat down, his hands fidgeting in his lap, the words he needed to say tangled in his throat. I wanted to apologize again," Danso began, his voice thick with regret, "for how I treated you in Ghana. I was confused, angry, and scared. I didn't know how to deal with my own feelings, and I lashed out at you." Kwame's expression relaxed slightly, though his eyes still held a hint of wariness. "You said some hurtful things, Danso. Things I didn't expect to hear from you." "I know," Danso whispered, guilt washing over him. "I didn't mean any of it. I was just scared of who I was becoming." Kwame studied him for a long moment. Finally, Kwame sighed, his shoulders loosening just a little. "You weren't the only one who was scared," Kwame admitted quietly. "When I fell in love with King Adebayo, I was terrified. I didn't know what it would cost or how dangerous it would be. But I learned that what scares us the most can also bring the most joy." A pang shot through Danso's heart at Kwame's words. He had always admired his cousin's courage. Now, sitting here beside him, Danso realized just how much he had missed Kwame's presence in his life. "I've always admired you," Danso confessed, his voice low. "Even when I said those awful things, deep down, I admired your strength. I was just too afraid to admit it." Kwame's expression gentled further, and the tension between them began to ease. "You don't need to keep apologizing," Kwame said gently. "What matters is how we move forward." Danso nodded, feeling a bit lighter, but there was still more he needed to say. He turned fully to face Kwame, his voice filled with vulnerability. "I love Wamba," Danso said firmly, his heart in his throat. "I would give up everything, my throne, my kingdom, just to be with him. He's changed me, opened my heart in ways I never thought possible. But I need your help, Kwame. When my father finds out, I don't know what's going to happen. but I can't do this without you. Please." Tears filled Danso's eyes, and he looked so vulnerable, so much like the boy Kwame had watched grow up. In that moment, Kwame's heart softened completely. "You are not alone," Kwame said, his voice emotional. "I'll be here, for you and for Wamba. But I need to know that you won't hurt him. I can't bear to see him in pain." "I would never hurt him," Danso whispered, his voice trembling with sincerity. "I love him too much." For a long moment, Kwame simply looked at him, his gaze searching. Then slowly, he reached out and pulled Danso into a tight embrace. It was a hug filled with forgiveness, understanding, and the bond they shared. As they pulled away, both had tears in their eyes, the weight of their past beginning to dissolve in the warmth of the moment. "I'm here, Danso," Kwame said softly. "Your family. You always will be." Danso's heart overflowed, a sense of peace settling over him for the first time in what felt like forever. He had made things right with Kwame, and whatever lay ahead, he knew he wouldn't face it alone. "Thank you," Danso whispered with all the gratitude he felt. Kwame smiled. "Just promise me one thing," he said gently. "Promise me you'll take care of Wamba. He's precious to me." "I promise," Danso replied, his heart full. The palace had grown quiet after Kwame and Danso bid each other goodnight. Most of the servants had retired, leaving only the soft rustle of the evening breeze. As Kwame walked through the dimly lit corridors, his mind shifted from Danso to the deeper burden he carried, his unresolved rift with King Adebayo. For weeks, Kwame had avoided their shared bedroom, allowing the distance between them to grow. But tonight, as he stood before the door to their room, Wamba's bold question from dinner echoed in his mind. He hadn't realized how much his and Adebayo's tension had been affecting their children. It was time to confront it. Quietly, Kwame pushed the door open. Adebayo sat by the window, bathed in soft moonlight, lost in thought. The sight of him, strong yet weary, sent a pang through Kwame's chest. Adebayo turned slightly, his expression softening when he saw Kwame. "You're back," he said quietly, his voice tinged with emotion. Kwame nodded, stepping further into the room. "I am." For a long moment, they just stood there, the quiet between them heavy with all the things left unsaid. Finally, Adebayo stood and walked toward Kwame, stopping just short of touching him. "We've been avoiding this for too long," Adebayo said softly. "I hate fighting with you." Kwame's heart tightened at his words, the tenderness cutting through the distance they had allowed to build. "I hate it too," Kwame whispered, his voice overflowing with emotion. "But I don't know how to fix this." Adebayo stepped closer, gently taking Kwame's hand. His touch was hesitant, as if unsure of its welcome. "We will," Adebayo said, his voice filled with quiet determination. "We always do." Kwame's gaze fell to their joined hands, his heart heavy with doubt. "But what if we can't?" he whispered. Adebayo's grip tightened, his eyes locking onto Kwame's with fierce resolve. "We will. Because I love you, Kwame. I won't let us fall apart." Kwame's eyes filled with unshed tears, the vulnerability in Adebayo's words cutting through the walls he had built around his heart. "I don't want to lose you," Kwame whispered. "But the child, I don't know how to get past it." Adebayo reached up to cup Kwame's face, his thumb brushing gently across his cheek. "I want a child, Kwame. A biological child. Not because I don't love Wamba and Arewa. I do. They are our children, but there's a part of me that longs to see my bloodline continue." Kwame swallowed hard, the sincerity in Adebayo's words making his heart ache. He understood the desire for a legacy, but the thought of Adebayo being with someone else for that purpose felt unsettling. "It feels like cheating," Kwame admitted, his voice barely a whisper. "I don't know if I can handle that." Adebayo's face softened with understanding. He stepped even closer, their bodies almost touching. "I know it feels that way, but you are my heart, Kwame. No one could ever take your place." Kwame's breath hitched, the depth of Adebayo's love washing over him like a balm. He closed his eyes, letting himself feel it, though the pain still lingered. "I don't want to lose you," Kwame whispered again, his voice trembling. Adebayo gently pulled him closer, their foreheads resting against each other. "You won't. We'll figure this out together. We've survived worse, and we'll survive this too. I want us to do this together." Kwame's heart brimmed with emotion, and for the first time in weeks, he let himself lean into Adebayo's embrace, allowing the fear and tension to melt away, if only for a moment. "I've missed you, Ade," Kwame whispered. "I've missed you too." The palace grounds were bathed in soft sunlight the next day. Wamba and Danso sat beneath a large baobab tree, the breeze carrying the faint sounds of the kingdom beyond. Peace enveloped them, a rare moment of stillness amidst the chaos that usually surrounded them. Wamba leaned back against the tree, watching Arewa in the distance as she collected pebbles. She had an obsession with pebbles. A small smile tugged at his lips, and beside him, Danso sat with a book open in his lap, though his eyes were on Wamba more than the words on the page. "Do you think we'll always have moments like this?" Danso asked softly, breaking the comfortable silence. Wamba turned to him, his dark eyes soft with affection. "I hope so," he whispered, his hand brushing lightly against Danso's. The touch lingered, and for a brief moment they just stared at each other. Danso's breath caught as Wamba leaned closer, their lips almost meeting, until the sound of hurried footsteps interrupted their quiet moment. "Prince Wamba, Prince Danso," a palace servant called, rushing toward them with a look of grave urgency. "The king requests your presence in the grand throne room immediately." Wamba's heart skipped a beat. "What's wrong?" he asked, his voice tense. The servant hesitated, his gaze flickering to Danso before he spoke. "Your father's men are here, Prince Danso," he said quietly. The words hit Danso like a jolt. His body stiffened, and a chill seemed to settle over him. The peacefulness of the moment shattered, replaced by a rising sense of dread. Wamba turned to him, instinctively reaching for Danso's hand to offer comfort. But Danso pulled away sharply, his eyes hardening. The warmth Wamba had come to know so well vanished immediately, replaced by the cold, distant boy he had first met. "Danso," Wamba started, his voice filled with concern, but Danso stood abruptly, his jaw clenched. "We need to go," was all Danso said, his tone clipped. Arewa came running toward them, her curiosity piqued. "What's going on?" she asked, her innocent eyes wide. Wamba forced a smile, though his heart pounded in his chest. "It's nothing," he said gently. "We'll be back soon." With that, Wamba and Danso followed the servant toward the main building, their footsteps heavy. The closer they got to the grand throne room, the tighter the tension became between them. When they entered the room, King Adebayo and Kwame were already waiting, their faces etched with worry. The air was heavy with unease. At the far end of the room stood the messenger from Ghana, draped in the royal colors of King Kofi. His posture was rigid, his expression unreadable as he bowed before Danso. "I bring a message from your father, King Kofi," the messenger said, his voice firm. "You are to return to Ghana immediately." The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Wamba glanced at Danso, expecting him to protest, but Danso's face was unreadable, his shoulders stiff. For a long moment, no one spoke. Finally, Danso straightened and, to Wamba's relief, said coldly, his voice like steel, "I'm not going anywhere. I'm staying in Nigeria." The messenger didn't flinch. He took a step closer, his eyes locked on Danso. "Your father thought you might say that." His voice was low, laced with something ominous. "He sent a special message for you." The tension in the room tightened. King Adebayo and Kwame exchanged wary glances, but before anyone could ask what the message was, the messenger moved closer to Danso, leaning in to whisper something in his ear. Whatever the messenger said turned Danso's face pale. His eyes widened with fear, and his body tensed as if the air had been knocked out of him. Wamba, watching closely, felt his heart drop. "Danso," Wamba whispered, stepping closer. "What did he say?" Danso didn't answer. He stood frozen, the fear in his eyes clear, but his lips pressed tightly together. "Danso?" King Adebayo asked, his deep voice filled with concern. "What's going on?" Again, Danso said nothing. After what felt like an eternity, he turned to the messenger, his voice hollow as he spoke. "I'll return to Ghana." Wamba's heart sank. "What? No, Danso, you can't." "We leave immediately," the messenger interrupted, his tone brisk and final. Panic surged in Wamba's chest. He grabbed Danso's arm, pulling him aside with desperate force. "You don't have to go," Wamba pleaded, his voice trembling. "What did he say? Did something happen? Is your father in danger?" Danso's jaw tightened, his gaze darting briefly toward the messenger, as if the man's presence alone suffocated him. "My dad's fine," he murmured, his voice distant. "Everything is fine." "Then why are you going?" Wamba's voice cracked, tears threatening to spill. "What did he say to you?" Danso looked up, his eyes brimming with pain, but his lips stayed firmly pressed together. Whatever had been whispered to him, it had shaken him to his core. He opened his mouth to speak, then hesitated, his eyes clouded with the sorrow so deep it made Wamba's stomach twist. "I have no choice." "Yes, you do," Wamba said, barely able to breathe. "Please, Danso, stay with me." He reached for Danso's hand, but Danso jerked away quickly, stealing a glance over his shoulder at the messenger, as though even touching Wamba was forbidden. The fear in his eyes had only grown darker. Wamba's heart shattered. The boy he knew, the boy who had been so warm, so full of love these past few weeks, was fading before his eyes, replaced by someone cold, distant, unreachable. "I have to go," Danso whispered, barely loud enough to be heard. His voice trembled as he spoke, the weight of the words too much to bear. "Why won't you tell me what he said?" Wamba's voice was thick with emotion, tears welling. "Please don't leave me like this. Don't shut me out." Danso met his gaze, and for a moment, Wamba saw the boy he loved flicker back to life. His eyes softened, filled with regret, but still, he said nothing. Instead, he turned away, walking toward the exit where the messenger waited, his steps heavy with dread. Wamba watched helplessly as Danso said a brief, stiff goodbye to Kwame and King Adebayo before following the messenger out. The door creaked closed behind them with a final, echoing thud. And in that moment, Wamba felt his entire world slipping away. Just moments ago, everything had been perfect. Now, all he could do was stand frozen, his heart breaking as the boy he loved disappeared beyond the door. What had the messenger whispered? Why was Danso so afraid? And why, in the face of everything they had fought for, did he feel like he was losing him forever?